Today we have Hattie Pearson from Hits Radio, we have Laura Sanderson from Captify, and we have Emma Thompson from OMG Newcastle. But before we start, I thought maybe you guys can introduce yourselves properly, give a bit of a history of yourselves, where you're from, what you were doing, and then we'll go into questions. Hattie, do you want to start first?
Okay. Hello, yeah, I'm Hattie Pearson, a radio presenter on Hits Radio. I do 1 till 4 p.m. every day. Literally round the corner. After I finish here, I've got like a 5-minute walk to work, so it's rather convenient. You might have heard me give away loads of money. That's basically what I do for a living, which is awesome. I'm also a DJ. I have my own club night and do that. More recently, I've been doing voiceover work a lot. I host events and stuff as well. But more recently, kind of been doing creating content around endurance sports. So I did my first Ironman back in 2023, and in June, thank you. It's not an easy thing to do, especially in the time I did it. I did it really fast for me, actually. And this year I'm taking on, in like 14 weeks, I'm taking on a 7-day triathlon. I'm going from Loch Ness to London. So a big thing for me around sport is getting women into sport, encouraging that, and basically being part of a community who are called 10 Iron Women, encouraging more women to get to the start line and pushing for a 50-50 gender split, because especially in endurance sports and triathlon specifically, usually the participation is around 10%, so I'm a big cheerleader for that.
Blimey. Follow that, Laura.
Yeah, follow that.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Hi, I'm Laura. I'm Head of Regional Sales at Captify, but I've worked in the northern media industry for about 13 years now. Really nothing to follow up from a sports perspective, and I don't give away any money either. But really enjoying Pilates at the moment and supporting Blue North and all the other various things in northern media, so very happy to be speaking this morning.
Hi, I'm Emma Thompson and I'm Head of Client Leadership at Omnicom Media Group in Newcastle. I've been in digital media and primarily specialised in e-commerce for the last 15 years. And in terms of sport, I previously was into mountain biking, actually. I have biked to the top of Helvellyn, which is a personal achievement. It was an e-bike, it wasn't a manual bike. But I haven't biked since I had my little boy 18 months ago. That's me.
I didn't think there was going to be so much sport. I'm not going to go into my exercise routine every week, guys, so don't worry. Obviously, we've just touched on a bit of your career journey so far. What inspired the growth and how you got to where you are now? Do you want to go first?
Yeah, so I started my career straight out of university in a traditional marketing role for a B2B SME. So I was responsible back then, about 15 years ago, for lead gen. And what inspired me to get into media really was that I was in a paid search meeting with the paid search agency at the time, and I wanted to sit at their side of the table. I loved their passion, their energy, their capability, and the pace of innovation in the industry. So not long after that, I moved to my first agency role for a large independent in the Northeast. And now I've got sort of over a decade of digital media and e-commerce experience. And then I've naturally just fallen into a leadership role for the last 7 years because I love to celebrate success, that of me, my team, and my clients. That's me.
Thank you. Laura?
If I was being really honest, I did a PR and marketing degree and I really wanted to work in this industry, and I just thought it was a bit glamorous and something fun to do. And moving into leadership roles was really just about earning more money at the start, if I'm really honest. But what I actually realised once I got seats at the tables that I wanted to be at and the positions that I wanted to be was that people's voices can be really powerful. And I realised like people were actually listening to what I was saying, and we could make some positive changes and have different ideas around the table. So that's really what inspired more of a growth into a leadership position, to say, okay, actually, this is really interesting, I'm passionate about it, and people are listening, and that's important. We need, diverse voices around the table, so...
Thank you. That kind of comes into what you were saying as well, I suppose, Emma, with the, finding it quite an exciting thing to be talking about as well. Hattie?
Yeah, so I did student radio at University of Manchester. I studied English language. And at the time when I went to uni, I kind of think I wanted to do print. and then found student radio and absolutely loved it and thought, this is all right, isn't it? If I can figure out a way to get paid to do this, we're laughing. And then kind of just persisted, did all the shifts that nobody wants to do, like 3 till 7 a.m. Saturday, Sunday morning for 4 years on XFM when absolutely no one's listening. And then kind of just going from there and knocking doors down and being persistent and pushing for those roles and being about when people are off and jumping at the opportunity to be the person that gets those cover shifts, and then hoping for the best and never getting figured out, really. So that's what we're still doing what we're doing.
Well, I think you're doing quite well from it. Is there a point that you thought, do you know what, I feel like I've made it now?
Yeah, so I was doing, like I say, I've done all the kind of night shifts you could possibly do, which is just the most awful thing. So I did 3 till 7 a.m. Saturday, Sunday morning on XFM for a few years. And then I got moved to 1 till 4 a.m. Monday to Friday. I did that for like 2 years.
And was that a promotion for going from 3 till 7 to 1 till 4?
It was, because it was 2 days a week to 5 days a week. So obviously, as a freelancer, I was then getting paid, more than double what I was previously getting paid. And I got my weekends back, so yeah, it really was a promotion. And then I did that for like 5 years. I was just like, I can't do this anymore. Like, it's killing. I was only like 25, I think, but I was like, it's making me ill. Like, I can't live the rest of my life like this. So I left without another job to go to, which in radio is quite unheard of. You normally sit in your job until you get the sack. And then I knocked on the door at Key 103 at the time, which is now Hits Radio, and I said, look, have you got anything going? And they gave me kind of some weekend shows, did that for a bit, and then it turned into Hits Radio. Must have been about 4 years ago, maybe 5, and they put me on earlies, so I was on 4 till 6 a.m. Monday to Friday, and I did that for a year, and then my boss just said, do you want to go for a coffee, which he never does, and I was like, oh God, what's going on? And he just said, do you want afternoons? And I was like, oh my God, yeah, like, I've literally been working my ass off doing all the shit that nobody wants to do for 10 years, and this is the moment of, like, I can turn up at 12 and leave at 4, yeah. So that was the moment I'd felt like I made it, yeah.
You don't have to be up at crazy hours of the morning.
No, but I still am to run marathons and
all
stuff.
Of those things, exactly. Well, sticking with you, Hattie, do you find that there has been any challenges specifically around you being a woman within broadcasting, or is that not something that comes up as much?
I think there's still definitely... It's obvious that there's still a lot of men at the top in the leadership roles, but that is getting a lot better. Gone are the days where you look at lineups from lots of diversity perspectives that it's all middle-aged white men. That just doesn't happen anymore, thankfully, because it's really boring to listen to when that does happen, imagine. And so, yeah, thankfully that is evolving and it's changing. So I think hopefully I was at the right point doing what I hopefully am good at, is just being myself. And I think that's the thing when you're a radio presenter, you've got to not be anyone else. You can't put on a voice or pretend you're somebody you're not, and authenticity is key. So not kind of pigeonholing yourself, and it's really hard because essentially the one person that gets to choose whether you're on the radio station or not is your boss. There's kind of like not a really much wider decision. So if that boss isn't doing a good job and the listener figures go down, then you're probably going to lose your job as well. So you kind of just got to ride the wave. So I feel very fortunate that, yeah, I think, said yes to all the opportunities at the right time, like played my cards right, worked really hard, and it's all kind of just got my ducks in the row at the right time, and it's worked out the way I wanted to.
Brilliant. And I think authenticity was something that came up so much yesterday across this stage. Laura, how about yourself? Was that, have you ever felt that your gender has been something that has held you back or anything across your career?
Yes. I think, thinking about first roles and what people look like when you join those businesses, the first marketing agency that I joined was a team of 6 men, and I was drafted in as a copywriter, and that was great. And, I was told very much if a client meeting was happening, it was, excuse my language, tits and teeth, and get ready for it and wear a nice skirt. And work life and home life felt very different, because in work you were very cookie cutter, as in pencil skirt, heels, all of that sort of stuff, which is fine. But you had to present yourself in a particular way, and that was dictated by the men in the room, particularly as a young person. I also found as well, as I'm sort of older now, I realise it's the same. I thought as a younger woman that was a real challenge, because actually you were already in a room with even just some deeper voices around the table. You're already more high-pitched, and then with a young face, someone that's progressed quickly, never felt I was taken seriously.
Oh, the amount of times I've been asked to sort the teas out.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, you're the one that takes the notes and cleans up the room after and does all that. And that's just, I think, being nice and polite. But it does make an impact. But, you know, even now, as I'm in my late 30s, it's like actually that youngness wasn't the thing. It's just people have a view, and look, it's changing. But obviously it has been current throughout my career.
Thank you. Emma, is there anything on your side?
Well, every sort of promotion that I've ever gone for, I've been up against men. But I think I was quite fortunate because early on in my agency career, I was given some really good advice from a Northern marketing director who told me to make an ally of the CFO because ultimately they are going to approve my spend, my budget, etc. So that is ultimately what I did. In every promotion that I pitched for, I always made it about business outcomes, which resonate with them stakeholders. And yeah, it has shaped my career because I feel like I am where I am because of that advice.
Okay, something to take away already, guys, and we haven't even got to the last question. Looking at the regions in specifically, what positive changes have you seen for women's progression if we are looking at the industries that you guys are in?
Okay, so I think a big one over the last 18 months is, obviously I know I am biased, but OMG have further invested in the North. So 18 months ago we opened a new base in Newcastle, and we chose Newcastle due to the talent pool, diverse talent pool, offering perspectives outside of London across all D&I groups, including women. And not only that, it also opens up opportunity for people to relocate to the North as well. In terms of female, it's a progressive workplace, so there's a lot of progressive policies around enhanced maternity leave, adoption leave, surrogacy leave, IVF treatment leave. There's policies around menopause policy, period policy. It really is the most progressive place I've worked for across like all a life cycle of a female. So, you know, we've brought that more into the North, and, you know, we've invested heavily. We've created 40 roles already with a plan to be at 170 by the next 3 years.
I think the policies are really important, and also people feel safe enough to talk about it. Like, I think loads of companies have menopause policies, period policies, but then if you don't feel comfortable talking to your boss about it or your teammates, then there's no point in having those policies in place, right?
Yeah, definitely. It is, because it is such a diverse workforce, it is really normalised at OMG, which is, you know, as a working parent as well, it is really reassuring.
Good.
Yeah, I think on the policy point, just picking up on some of the things that were suggested and what you've just said there, I think having them living and breathing in the business is really important. And even when you're interviewing for roles or talking to businesses, I think it shouldn't be something that you're scared about asking in an interview, and it shouldn't be held against you if you ask that question as well. And I think now businesses are thinking more about the life cycle of someone in the company, not just young people coming in and internships. One of the favourite things that we have is an upturnship. So we had someone come to us who were, I might have the age wrong, but very late on in their career, say around their 50s, to then come and change what they were doing and learn something new and work in digital and ad tech, which I just think is fantastic. Our chief product officer is female. So again, it's like, it's not looking at people on the leadership board that are there as token. It's like these people are leading the businesses, particularly in digital ad tech. And I think our industry is really good at opening up those opportunities for really smart people, whoever they are.
Definitely. And I know it's a big thing that I think the IPA, Women in Programmatic and Bloom are talking about, is that, you know, making sure that people are rising, but then also identifying people that maybe are a little bit older than the traditional people coming into the media industry, and looking at them and saying, these are transferable skills, like how can we get them over and adapt it? So I think that's a big piece of work that's going on. I think it's definitely improvements, but it's getting there. Hattie, how about you?
Well, obviously in broadcast media, I think it's important to mention, you know, we had the BBC Move up here. They've got their headquarters, which obviously created a lot of opportunities. And Hits Radio itself, as part of the Bauer Group, is actually the only national radio station that broadcasts outside of London. So with part of the breakfast show coming from here, myself coming from up here, Gemma and Mike, who do the show after me as well. So, and then then some overnight shows and lots of weekend stuff as well. And I think it's kind of coming on to it might be kind of touching on the male ally point that we'll come on to shortly. But for me, it's, as a freelancer, again, I think those policies aren't as relevant. So it's making sure that, for women that are not benefiting from those, that it's still factored in, because security and incentives to kind of have those opportunities are less and less. But for me personally, having a male producer who's kind of got my back and knowing where I stand and getting him to make the brew is a nice feeling anyway.
I bet. Just dipping into that point though, from a freelance perspective, how do you go about having those conversations around, obviously you're not getting these extra benefits, so how do you then adapt that into your career?
It's a difficult one. Every time the contract negotiation comes up, it's a really difficult conversation, because that's it. It's like either take the job with no benefits or somebody else will do it. It really is like that kind of black and white. No holiday pay, no maternity, no sick pay. I was ill last week. I literally couldn't talk. My voice was in tatters, which is obviously quite crucial when you talk for a living. And I had to take 2 days off, and everyone was like, "You're never off sick." Yeah, because I don't like taking time off, because if I don't work, I don't get paid. So I don't know. I don't have the answers, because I'm a freelancer. I always have been. It's really stressful, and I think that's the point that we have to keep coming back to, is that how do we avoid burnout for people that work for themselves or run their own usually very small businesses, a team of like 2 or 3 or whatever, and making that work is like a continued struggle. So all the initiatives that your companies have sound great, but I don't see them.
That's definitely something to improve then. Yeah. Now, you've mentioned obviously about Bauer being up in Manchester, BBC moving up, obviously Channel 4 are moving up into Leeds as well. Have you ever experienced, thinking about the regions, a bit more of a hierarchy within the regions of locations? So Manchester does seem to be the main place that all of the businesses are based, but obviously we've got Leeds, Edinburgh, Birmingham, we've got Scotland, so many different areas. But, looking at careers, is there that choice in the regions?
I think within broadcast media, like I say, us being the only national radio station that broadcasts outside of London, it is still very London-centric, and even lots of the teams are based in London. Like I'd probably say about 80% of the social media team, for example. Obviously, you've got your regional sales and stuff all around the country from those bases, but lots of those bases are closing as networking is becoming more and more of a thing. We're losing breakfast shows. You've seen changes at Capital and at Global, for example, in recent weeks that is like indicative of that happening. So I think it is still very London-centric, and it's important to make sure that those opportunities are still there, because we could lose it. And obviously, it's like we all know that creativity isn't exclusive to London, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. Laura, obviously born and bred in the North East, have you found location being a really big factor in where you based yourself?
Yeah, I think I didn't want to move to London when I graduated, and the nearest big city to work in this type of role was Manchester. So I moved here, got my first role here. But what is really great to see is that there is more investment in other areas of the north. I absolutely love Manchester, and taking that on as it's somewhere I'll probably live and retire. But it's really great to see that there are places where I'm from, with businesses like yourselves, OMG, investing up there, that there's opportunities for graduates, there's opportunities for people that want to be closer to their families, to be able to work in this industry, but also for bigger businesses rather than just kind of founder-owned smaller marketing companies. So I think the investment is really important, and again, from a diversity perspective, we're getting a lot more people into the role who have different opinions, different voices. Creativity isn't exclusive to London or even the Northwest either, so I think that's a really, really good thing to see.
Thank you. And Emma, obviously you've mentioned about OMG and the investment in Newcastle. Is there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I agree. My company, OMG, yes, based in HQ'd in London, but we do operate across 3 locations in the UK, so Manchester as well, and obviously more recently Newcastle. A lot of our initiatives span all 3 locations, and we have 9 employee resource groups. We've got OMG Women and Gender Inclusion, Working Parents and Carers. There's 9 groups with an ambition to create a truly inclusive culture. In terms of like women-specific stuff, there's a couple of really strong initiatives, obviously, that we're bringing into Newcastle as well, because it's a 3rd location. We've got Omni Women, which promotes, obviously it brings together...
There was an event in Manchester recently, I think, wasn't there?
Yeah, there was, and we've also got one in Newcastle coming on the 12th of March, which coincides with International Women's Day. So Omni Women brings together female leaders and their allies, so men are also invited to that as well. And it really, I guess it's about networking and sharing experiences. And then we've also got something called the Ladder Society as well, which is really interesting. So that brings together female client leads and rising stars as well to share experiences. Personally for me, I didn't really have many options. I'm from Stockton, which is obviously, a little bit further south than Newcastle, and I was in a large independent for 10 years because there wasn't really an alternative for me. Now we are kind of growing in the region. That's, it's a positive disruption for the north, I feel. So that's kind of why I ended at OMG.
I mean, it sounds very good. Quite a lot of the benefits that you have. I mean, obviously you two have some lovely lilting accent as well. I'm sure everyone has heard. Have you ever felt that that's ever been a barrier, a stigma? Have you had any comments around it? Because there is, especially in the north, there's so many accents that come into it. Have you ever had any trouble?
We were talking about this, weren't we, earlier? And I think because I worked in independent, which was Stockton, and I was a majority accent. So everybody had the same accent, so everybody kind of looked and sounded the same. So I've never really felt it up until joining OMG, where obviously there's a lot of, different accents, dialects, a lot of Southerners, and I'm very conscious of it now. However, not negatively so, because it does kind of promote that diversity, but I can see why it may have negative connotations or anything, but for me it's never really been a thing up until now. I've never thought about it, never had to think about it, so it's definitely, I'll pass over to you.
How have you felt, Laura? Because obviously coming over to Manchester, dealing with a lot of people in London, have you had different experiences?
I went to university in between Liverpool and Manchester, Edge Hill. And those are 2 of the strongest accents in the north, I would say. While I was studying there, the reason I chose that course, that degree, was we were going to have some works experience as part of that, and there were going to be some media and marketing professionals as part of our teaching. And I was really excited to work with a marketing director who worked for a large charity at the time, a large homeless charity, and she was our lecturer. And I was just like, I want to be you. And she sat me down one day and said, okay, I'm going to be really honest with you, you're never going to get a job in this industry while you speak like that. I'd advise you get some elocution lessons and you do that alongside your degree, which I did.
So a lecturer told you that as career advice?
Yeah, and there were 6 of us in the class because it was a new kind of... it was great because we got loads of attention, but it was a new degree for them, even though they had a media department. So, I really took that on board. I went and did that, and when I first moved to Manchester, I was very conscious of how I spoke because of that feedback.
I mean, way to put you off for the rest of your career, if that's one of the first things that you're being advised.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I've dropped that now. But what I found was when clearly. But when I moved to Manchester, I was very nervous about it and I was very conscious of it. So I would definitely try and drop the accent, speak slower. And as I started working with companies, moving out of the first media agency I worked at, which was an independent, and actually then having exposure to London, I felt even more nervous then because they were further south than I've ever met before. I'd never met a Londoner before. It just was how it was. So I was very conscious of it, and it's actually took until my 30s to actually lean into it a little bit. I never even used to say I was from Sunderland. I'd always say I was from Newcastle. And there was always just a bit of a stigma of it, especially being working class. The accent, there's definitely judgment around it. And the thing that's broke it for me recently, just a very quick funny story. Our CEO, he lives and works in New York. if you've ever met an American CEO, it's normally like numbers, business, let's go. And I had my first meeting with him when I joined the business, and I was ready with all that information. And he was like, no, I just want to know who you are and where you're from. And I was just not ready to deliver that. And like the mask dropped because I wasn't prepared. I'd normally have a little script. And I just thought, I don't know what to say. So I was thinking, how do I explain Sunderland to this man who lives in New York and has only ever been to London? So I did, and we had this conversation. He's from St. Louis in the States, and that's very working class farming background. My family, my background are miners, shipbuilders, that type of thing. So we then had this real affinity. And as part of this conversation, I said to him, well, there's actually a documentary about where I'm from on Netflix, Sunderland Till I Die. Died a bit inside as soon as it came out my mouth because he wrote it down. Now, it turns out he watched all 3 seasons, and he is a massive Sunderland fan. And whenever I promote anything in the business about what we're doing in the regions, he always replies saying, how are the lads? And he's like, and actually now that relationship with him, because I was myself, is so much better. And it took me till I was nearly 38 to do that, and it's just shown me now in the last year that, you know, you should always be yourself and you should be proud of who you are and where you've come from.
Absolutely. And it would be... It'd be really interesting in a parallel universe to know if your lecturer hadn't said that, how different your opinions would be. Yeah. But I think your point there on your CEO kind of feeds in very nicely to the next question around male allies. So what role do you think male allies really play in fostering the inclusive workspace and helping for women to be retained and rise within your industries?
I've had opposite experiences of people who weren't that way and actually were quite fearful of strong women who were great at their jobs and independent. And I think it's really nice to be able to see the 2 sides of the coin and how that works, because actually the person who was opposite to my current CEO, that was fear-based, and I understand that. And I think as women we can be really empathetic and can kind of pick up those signals, and I think it's about managing that situation. But back to what they should be doing and allies in the business, I think it's so important to elbow your way and have a seat at the table and be there. But once you've gotten there, you want to feel safe enough to say something. You want to share your ideas. You want to be able to challenge. And I think an ally, whatever gender they are, should always do that. And even the simplest thing of if someone talks over you and someone goes, what were you going to say then? That can make such a difference. And I think just look around the room and just think, have we heard everybody? And what else could we hear? And have we got the right people in the room? And yeah, that would be my take on it.
Thank you. I mean, Emma, I know that you've spoken obviously about all of the inclusivity that Omnicom offers, but is there anything in particular?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, in terms of male allies, I have had professional coaching to actually deal with some of the, I don't know to say, ways of management, if you like, from men who have been at the top. And I've gone through coping mechanisms and etc. to kind of deal with that. And one of the things is I always remember what I was kind of taught in that coaching. It's usually just a thirst for knowledge, like they just want to know, which sometimes is why there may be like lots of questions and things like that. Like I feel like it's a lack of trust, but actually it's not. It's a thirst for knowledge. So goes back to the point that I made earlier about the CFO. Like he was a man and he continues to be a friend and mentor to this day. So I think it's all about being active allies as well. I think that, men need to have awareness and they need to know that, or at least need to encourage, if women are being underlooked or, not heard, that they encourage that conversation, because it's super important. And, the people that I've had coaching over won't know that I've done that. They're not here. But I did to deal with it, and it has helped, but not everybody has access to that or can do that. So yeah, it's important. It is important.
Definitely. I think that everyone having a voice really echoes through that as well. Hattie, I know that you said that your producer was, very, very supportive. Do you have anything to add to that point?
Yeah, I think kind of just echoing what you both said, it's important, I believe, to kind of lead by example. So, yeah, calling other things out, and not just when it might be male allies, but people of all genders or other minorities. If you see something in the workplace, call that out, question it, and by leading by example, that will show your colleagues as well as specifically other men, that you're not going to stand for it and you're going to stand up for yourself and others, which I think is the best way to kind of
And then people will do that as well, won't
exactly,
they?
that's what I mean. They'll see that, and they'll see that you're questioning it, and it's not okay for people to speak to that person because of their gender or their sexuality or where they're from or whatever it might be. So if you are leading by example, they'll see that as a leadership trait, and they'll follow suit, hopefully.
Amazing. We're coming to the end now, so final question for everybody. What's one area in the industry? I know we've talked about things that, you know, are going well, that are, you know, really good within industries, some that maybe aren't so great with the freelancing side of things. But what one area do you think there is still that needs a real improvement to help women stay, rise, and go into those leadership roles?
I've got 2 words: equal pay.
Hallelujah to that. Laura?
I agree. I love stuff like this. I think the conversations we're having here in this female leadership lounge is great, and what you guys do as a business. What I would say is there's so much grassroots stuff, I would call it, like Bloom North. There's so much, and MPA, there's so much that people do within themselves and to help people around them. But the businesses need to lean in more. It's very fine to say we've got the policies, you can challenge, you can ask the questions, but unless they lean in and address what is essentially, you know, sexism in the workplace and have equal pay and make these things enforced, there's only so much we can do as individuals. So I think if the businesses lean in as much as their teams and their people and the culture, then they'll thrive even more.
Exactly. Don't wait for the employees to say, can we have this? It's like, it should be a mandatory thing. Emma?
I think for me, female leadership is still quite a broad term. So it's understanding the makeup of that female representation. So obviously I'm, you know, a straight white female. I understand that there are more, obviously, minority characteristics. You know, there's age, ethnicity, social mobility, neurodiversity, like, you know, and it's really understanding the makeup of that female leadership and bringing those diverse perspectives into the workplace. And I think if I was to implement like an initiative, it would be about how we raise awareness of that so that we can all show up for our female colleagues.
Absolutely. Well, I'm sure everyone will echo this, but thank you so much, guys, for your time. I'm sure that everyone will take something away from this talk, if not more things. I think everyone will be hanging around for a little bit afterwards, so if anyone does want to come over and talk, then please do. But otherwise, have a wonderful rest of your day.